The Great Archive stood on the moon of Desser like a monument to everything the galaxy had ever known. Its towers reached toward the stars, built from white stone that glowed softly in the light of the distant sun. Inside its endless halls, millions of records waited in silence. History lived here. Truth lived here. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. Alara walked through the ancient corridors with quiet steps. She was Vellani, tall and slender, with silver skin that shimmered when light touched it. Her people lived for centuries and valued logic of all things. They did not believe in stories or myths. They believed in facts. And Alara had spent her entire life searching for them. She was young by Vellani standards, barely 200 years old. Most scholars her age studied safe subjects: trade records, star maps, the boring history of treaties signed and borders drawn. But Alara wanted something more. She wanted to find the things that others had forgotten. Today, she had found something impossible. The record crystal sat in her palm, glowing with a faint blue light. She had discovered it in the deepest level of the archive, in a section that had not been opened for over 1,000 years. Dust had covered everything. The air had been stale and dead. But the crystal was still intact, still holding its secrets after all this time. Alara placed it into the reading device and watched as images appeared in the air. Before her, she saw creatures unlike any species in the Galactic Accord. They stood on two legs like the Vellani, but their skin came in different colors: brown, pink, black. They had hair on their heads in shades of yellow, black, and red. Their eyes held something strange, something that made Alara uncomfortable: emotion, raw and uncontrolled. Emotion. The record spoke in a voice that crackled with age. Species designation: human, homeworld, Earth. Status: extinct. Last confirmed contact: 2,847 galactic years ago. Alara leaned closer, her heart beating faster than it should. The images showed human cities that reached into the sky, ships that crossed the darkness between stars, armies that marched in numbers too large to count. But they also showed something else: humans fighting humans, cities burning, worlds dying. The record described them as contradictions. They created art of heartbreaking beauty, then destroyed it in wars of terrible violence. They loved with fierce passion, then killed with cold efficiency. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 years, yet they built civilizations that spanned star systems. Humans possessed an unusual trait, the record continued. They adapted. Where other species required thousands of years to change, humans changed within generations. Their bodies were weak, but their minds were flexible. They learned. They evolved. They survived. Alara watched as the images shifted to show something darker. Ships of nightmare design, made of metal and flesh twisted together. The Devouring. She had heard stories of them, ancient tales that frightened children. But seeing them here, in an official record, made her blood run cold. The Devouring emerged from unknown space in the year 4217 of the old calendar. They consumed worlds without mercy or purpose. The young Galactic Accord could not stop them. Member species fell one by one. The images show battle after battle. The Accord ships, primitive by current standards, being torn apart. Planets being stripped of all life. Billions dying in silence. Then the humans ended the war. Alara saw human ships charging into combat. They were smaller than the Devouring vessels, simpler in design. But they moved with a fury that the record could barely capture. Human soldiers boarded enemy ships and fought with weapons and bare hands. They screamed as they died. They laughed as they killed. They did not retreat. The humans pushed the Devouring back across 12 systems in a campaign lasting 40 years. Their losses were catastrophic. Entire colony worlds were sacrificed to slow the enemy advance. But they did not stop. They could not stop. The record flickered, and Alara saw something that would stay with her forever. A human ship, damaged beyond repair, flying directly into the heart of a devouring command vessel. A single transmission played over the image. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my son to be brave. And tell these monsters that humanity does not kneel. The explosion consumed both ships. In the final year of the war, humans launched an assault on the Devouring's primary staging area. The battle lasted 19 days. Human casualties exceeded 90%. But they won. Alara watched as the last devouring ships fled into deep space. The war was over. Humanity had saved the galaxy. Following the war, humans retreated to their home systems. Contact with other species ended. The Galactic Accord, reorganized and expanded, chose to forget. Human records were sealed. Human achievements were erased. Within 3 generations, they became stories. Within 10, they became myths. The record ended with a final statement that made Alara's hands shake. Official Accord position: humans never existed. All references are to be treated as cautionary tales regarding the dangers of emotional instability and aggressive expansion. This record has been classified at the highest level. Access is forbidden. Alara sat in the dark room for a long time, staring at the empty air where the images had been. Her entire life, she had been taught that the Accord represented wisdom, that the 12 species had built peace through logic and cooperation, that emotional species were dangerous and unstable. But now she knew the truth. The Accord had not built peace. Humans had bought it with their blood. And then the Accord had erased them from history. She had to tell someone. 3 days later, Alara stood before the Accord Council. Representatives from all 12 species sat in a great circle, their faces showing various forms of boredom. A young Vellani scholar requesting time to speak was not unusual. They expected nothing interesting. Alara showed them the record crystal. She showed them the images of human cities, human ships, human soldiers dying to save a galaxy that did not remember their names. She spoke of the war. She spoke of the sacrifice. She spoke of the lie that had buried the truth for nearly 3,000 years. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then the laughter began. The Tauric representative, a massive creature covered in green scales, made a sound like rocks grinding together. You expect us to believe that soft-bodied primitives saved the galaxy? This is fantasy. The Scylla speaker, an insectoid being with a dozen eyes, clicked its mandibles in amusement. The young scholar has read too many children's stories. Humans are myths. Nothing more. One by one, the council members dismissed her. They called her research flawed. They called her conclusions emotional. They told her to return to studying proper history and leave fantasy where it belonged. Alara left the chamber with tears in her silver eyes. She had found the truth, and no one would listen. But someone had been listening. In the shadows of the observation gallery, Admiral Varath of the Tauric military watched the young scholar leave. He had not laughed with the others. He could not, because 6 months ago, his patrol fleet had encountered something at the edge of known space. Ships of unknown design, moving in perfect formation. They had not responded to any communication. They had simply watched and waited. Varath had recognized their design from ancient records that he was not supposed to have seen. Records that matched exactly what the young Vellani had just shown. The ships were human. And if humans had returned, it could only mean one thing. Something terrible was coming. Varath left a council chamber and began walking toward the military command center. He had preparations to make, wars to plan, and a species to find. The myths were waking up, and the galaxy was not ready. The first warning came from a mining colony on the edge of Accord space. A simple message, broadcast on emergency frequencies, repeated over and over until it suddenly stopped. They are here. They are eating everything. Please help us. Please. By the time the Accord patrol ships arrived, the colony was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. The buildings, the equipment, the people, even the soil and rock beneath them. All that remained was bare stone, smooth and lifeless, as if the planet had been licked clean by some massive tongue. Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the Tostolas images with cold fury. He knew what this was. He had hoped he was wrong, but the evidence was undeniable. The devouring had returned. Over the following weeks, more colonies fell. The pattern was always the same. A distress call, a sudden silence, and then nothing but empty ground where life had once existed. The devouring did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed every living thing, every piece of metal, every drop of water. They took it all, leaving nothing behind. The Accord Council met in emergency session. For the first time in living memory, representatives of all 12 species showed fear. The devouring had been defeated once, long ago, by a species that no longer existed. How could they hope to win this time? "We must sue for peace," the Scylla speaker insisted, its voice trembling. "We must offer them something, tribute, territory, anything." Vorath slammed his massive fist against the table. The devouring do not understand peace. They do not want territory. They want to feed. And they will not stop until they have eaten everything in this galaxy. "Then what do you suggest?" The Villani elder asked, her voice calm but her silver skin pale with worry. "We fight. We gather every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. And we fight." The war began badly. The Accord had been at peace for 3,000 years. Their ships were designed for patrol and trade, not combat. Their soldiers had trained for ceremony and peacekeeping, not war. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. The devouring had not forgotten anything. In battle after battle, Accord forces were slaughtered. The enemy ships moved with terrible coordination, surrounding and overwhelming their targets. The creatures inside were nightmares made real. Part machine, part flesh. All hunger. They did not feel fear. They did not feel pain. They simply advanced, consumed, and moved on. Within 3 months, the Accord had lost 40 star systems. Billions of lives. Half their fleet. Vorath fought in every major engagement, watching his crews die around him. He tried new tactics, new formations, new weapons. Nothing worked. The devouring learned from every battle, adapting faster than any species he had ever seen. Except one. In his private quarters, Vorath read the Forbidden records again and again. The human records. The ones that described how they had fought the devouring the first time. Their strategies had been insane by Accord standards. Ships deliberately crashing into enemies. Soldiers boarding enemy vessels and fighting in corridors filled with poison and fire. Entire planets rigged to explode, taking devouring fleets with them. The humans had won through sacrifice, through accepting losses that would break any other species, through refusing to surrender, no matter how hopeless the situation became. Vorath made his decision. He gathered his most loyal captains in secret and told them his plan. They would take the remainder of the fleet to the Forbidden Sector, the region of space that the Accord had sealed 3,000 years ago, the region where humans had last been seen. "This is madness," his second officer, a young Tauric named Baron, whispered. "The humans are extinct. Everyone knows this." "Everyone is wrong," Vorath replied. "I saw their ships at the edge of our space 6 months ago. They are out there, and they are the only ones who know how to win this war." And if they refuse to help? If they hate us for forgetting them? Vorath looked at the images of destroyed colonies, of dead worlds, of the devouring fleet growing larger with every passing day. Then we die either way. At least this way, we die with hope. The journey to the Forbidden Sector took 3 weeks. Vorath's fleet, reduced to just 47 ships, traveled through empty space that no Accord vessel had entered in millennia. The stars here were old and cold. The darkness seemed deeper somehow, as if space itself was watching them with unfriendly eyes. Then they reached the boundary, marked by ancient warning beacons that still broadcast their message after all this time. Turn back. This space is forbidden. Any vessel that enters will be destroyed. Vorath ordered his ships forward. They emerged near a small planet orbiting a yellow star. At first glance, there was nothing special about it. A blue-green world with white clouds and vast oceans. It could have been any of 1,000 habitable planets in the galaxy. Then the sensors began screaming. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet. Hundreds of them. Each one bristling with weapons that Vorath's officers could not identify. Ships patrolled in perfect formation. Their designs unlike anything in the Accord database. On the planet's surface, cities glowed with light. Billions of life signs registered on the scanners. Impossible, Baran whispered. They were supposed to be extinct. A transmission cut through all frequencies. The voice spoke in a language that the translation system struggled to process. It was old. Incredibly old. But Vorath recognized it from the records. Human speech. Unknown vessels. You have entered Sol System territory. State your intentions or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds. Vorath felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. He walked to the communication station himself and cleared his throat. He knew only one human word, preserved in the ancient records as a greeting. Hello. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Vorath counted his heartbeats. 30, 40, 50. Then a new voice came through. Younger. Female. Speaking in accented but clear Accord common. Well, that is unexpected. A Tauric-speaking human. Who are you? And why have you violated our space? Vorath spoke quickly, knowing that his 60 seconds were almost gone. He told them about the Devouring's return, about the billions already dead, about the Accord's failure, about his desperate journey to find help. Another pause. Shorter this time. Stand by. Do not move. Do not power weapons. Any hostile action will result in immediate destruction of your fleet. Vorath ordered his ships to hold position. They waited for hours. The human patrol ships circled them like predators studying prey. Finally, a massive vessel emerged from behind the planet's moon. It was larger than any ship Vorath had ever seen, covered in weapons and armor that made his own flagship look like a child's toy. A shuttle launched from the vessel and flew toward Vorath's ship. They want to meet in person, Baran reported. His voice shaking, Vorath straightened his uniform and walked to the docking bay. He had no idea what to expect. The records described humans as emotional, unstable, violent. But they also described them as brave, loyal, and fierce. He supposed he was about to find out which description was accurate. The shuttle doors opened. A human stepped out. She was shorter than Vorath by half, with black hair tied back from her face and dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a military uniform in dark blue, covered with medals and symbols he did not recognize. Her face showed nothing. No fear. No curiosity. Nothing. I am Commander Yuna of the United Terran Defense Force, she said. You have one chance to convince me why we should care about a galaxy that forgot we ever existed. Vorath looked at this small creature who commanded weapons that could destroy his fleet in moments. He thought about pride. about dignity, about all the things that Torek valued. Then he thought about the billions dying while he stood here. He knelt. "Please," he said, "help us." Commander Yuna looked at the kneeling Torek admiral and felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just cold calculation. The same way she looked at everything that came from the galaxy beyond Sol Dot. She had grown up hearing stories about that galaxy. Stories of betrayal. Stories of how humanity had bled and died to save species that now denied they had ever existed. Her grandmother had been a veteran of the First War, one of the few who had survived the final battle. She had told young Yuna about the friends she had lost, the planets she had watched burn, the promises the Accord had made and broken. "They will forget us," her grandmother had said. "They always forget. It is easier to forget than to feel grateful." Now a Torek was kneeling before her, begging for help. Part of Yuna wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to order her ships to open fire. But she was a soldier, not a politician. The decision was not hers to make. "Get up," she said. "Torek, do not kneel. It is unsettling." Admiral Vorath rose slowly, his eyes meeting hers. She saw something there that surprised her. Respect. This creature understood what it had cost him to kneel before her. And he had done it anyway. "Come with me," she said. "There are people you need to meet." The journey to Earth took 3 hours. Yuna led Vorath and 2 of his officers through the orbital stations, past ships and soldiers and weapons that made the Turuk's eyes widen with shock. 3,000 years of preparation. 3,000 years of building and planning and waiting. All for this moment. Earth itself was beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds drifting across continents that Vorath did not recognize. Cities sparkled along coastlines and in valleys, connected by transport systems that moved faster than his eyes could follow. "We have 12 colony worlds now," Yuna explained as their shuttle descended. "Hidden, protected. The galaxy thinks we are extinct, and we have worked hard to keep it that way." "Why?" Vorath asked. "With your power, you could rule the Accord." Yuna's expression did not change. "We do not want to rule anyone. We wanted to be left alone. To heal. To rebuild." She paused. "And to prepare. Prepare for what?" "For this. We knew the devouring would return. They were wounded in the First War, not destroyed. We tracked their retreat into deep space. We watched them rebuild. We knew it was only a matter of time." The shuttle landed outside a building that stretched toward the sky, its walls made of glass and steel. Inside, Yuna led them through corridors filled with people. Humans of every shape and size, moving with purpose and energy. Some wore uniforms. Some wore simple clothes. All of them stopped to stare at the alien visitors walking among them. "They have never seen another species," Yuna said. Most thought the stories were exaggerated. They reached a large chamber where 12 people sat around a curved table. These were the leaders of humanity, representatives from each colony world. They watched Vorath with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "Admiral Vorath of the Torek military," Yuna announced. "He has come to beg for our help." A woman with gray hair and sharp eyes leaned forward. "Tell us why we should listen." Vorath spoke for an hour. He showed them footage from the battles, images of destroyed worlds, numbers that represented billions of dead. He explained the Accord's failure, their weakness, their desperation. He hid nothing. When he finished, the chamber was silent. 3,000 years ago, a man with a scarred face said, "We sacrificed everything to save the galaxy." Do you know how many humans died in that war? 7 billion. 7 billion people, gone forever. And how did the galaxy thank us? By erasing our existence from history. By teaching their children that we were myths. By sealing our space and pretending we never mattered. "I know," Vorath said quietly. I have read the records. What was done to you was wrong. But the people dying now did not make that decision. They are innocents. Children. Families. Do they deserve to die for the sins of their ancestors? The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued for continued isolation. Let the galaxy burn. Let them face the consequences of their arrogance. Humanity had earned its peace. Why should they sacrifice it for ungrateful strangers? Others argued for intervention. The devouring would not stop with the Accord. Eventually, they would come for Earth. Better to fight them now, with allies, than later, alone. The arguments went back and forth, growing heated. Voices were raised. Fists slammed on tables. This was what it meant to be human. Emotion driving every word, every gesture, every decision. Then an old man stood up from the corner of the room. He was ancient by human standards. His skin wrinkled and spotted with age, his hair thin and white. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were sharp and clear. The chamber fell silent as he approached the center. "I am Deo," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I am 340 years old. I am one of the last who remembers the First War." He looked at the council members one by one. "I was 19 when the devouring came. I watched my parents die. My brothers. My first love. I watched planets burn and ships explode and friends scream as they were consumed alive. I spent 40 years fighting, and every day of those 40 years, I wanted to die." Tears formed in his ancient eyes, but his voice did not waver. "When the war ended, we made an oath. Never again. Never again would we let such evil exist in the galaxy. Never again would we stand by while innocents suffered. The Accord may have forgotten us, but we did not forget ourselves. We did not forget who we are." He turned to face Vorath directly. "You ask for help. You kneel before us, a Torek, a warrior race that has never knelt to anyone. You humble yourself for your people. Or, that is something I can respect." Deho looked back at the council. "I have lived long enough to see my grandchildren and great-grandchildren grow up in peace. I have lived long enough to see humanity heal from wounds I thought would never close. And now I am old enough to know that peace means nothing if we abandon our souls to keep it." He raised his cane and pointed at the images still floating in the air. Images of death and destruction. Those are not Torek dying. Those are not Vellani or Silith. Those are living beings. Thinking beings. Beings who feel pain and fear and love, just as we do. And if we let them die when we have the power to save them, then we deserve to be forgotten. We deserve to be nothing but myths." The old man sat down, exhausted from the effort of speaking. The council voted. The result was close. Closer than anyone had expected. But when the final count was made, the decision was clear. Humanity would go to war. Yuna received the news with a single nod. She had known what the outcome would be. Humans could never stand by and watch suffering. It was their greatest weakness and their greatest strength. She walked back to where Vorath waited and looked up at the massive alien. "The council has decided. We will help you." Vorath's eyes widened. His massive hands trembled. "Thank you. Thank you." "Do not thank us yet," Yuna said. "You have not seen how we fight. You may wish you had died with the others before this is done." She turned and walked toward the door. "Come, we have a galaxy to save." The last defense line of the Galactic Accord had formed around Thesser, the archive moon. 12 species had gathered their remaining ships here, a fleet of just over 200 vessels. They floated in space like leaves waiting to be swept away by a coming storm. Below them, on the moon's surface, billions of refugees huddled in underground shelters. Vellani, Torek, Silith, and dozens of other species, all pressed together in the darkness. Old enemies stood beside each other. Old hatreds were forgotten. None of that mattered anymore. Only survival mattered. Alara was among them. The young Vellani scholar had refused to evacuate to the inner systems. She had spent years studying the records of humanity, and now, as the galaxy faced its end, she wanted to witness whatever would come next. If the Accord was going to die, she would die with it. The devouring fleet appeared at the edge of the system like a spreading stain against the stars. Thousands of ships, each one a twisted combination of metal and flesh. They moved in perfect coordination, surrounding the Accord fleet, cutting off any escape. On the bridge of the last Accord command ship, the officers watched their sensors with empty eyes. They had fought for months and lost everything. Friends, family, hope. Now they waited to die. Enemy fleet entering weapons range, a technician reported, his voice flat with exhaustion. All ships are powering weapons. Estimated time to engagement 4 minutes. The Accord commander, a Vellani elder named Soren, closed his eyes and prepared to give the order to attack. It would be pointless. They would all die. But they would die fighting. Then something happened. The space behind the Accord fleet tore open. Not slowly, like normal hyperspace jumps. This was violent, sudden, like reality itself was being ripped apart by force. Light blazed across every sensor, blinding instruments and forcing officers to shield their eyes. Ships emerged from the tier. Hundreds of them. 700, the sensors eventually counted. They were unlike anything in the Accord database. Sleek and angular, painted in dark colors. Covered with weapons that pulsed with barely contained energy. Transmission broadcast across all frequencies. This is Admiral Yuna of the United Terran First Fleet. Accord forces, hold your position. We will handle this. Silence filled the Accord bridge. No one could speak. No one could breathe. Soren found his voice first. Humans. The humans are real. The Terran fleet moved forward without hesitation. They cut through the space between the Accord line and the devouring formation, placing themselves directly in the path of the enemy advance. At their head flew the largest ship anyone had ever seen. Its hull was covered in weapons and armor, and across its side, written in letters that burned with inner light, was a single word: remembrance. The devouring fleet paused. For the first time in the entire war, they seemed uncertain. Then they attacked. The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 generations. Human ships moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fly in rigid formations like the Accord. They flowed like water, adapting to every enemy movement, exploiting every weakness. Their weapons fired with terrible accuracy, cutting through devouring vessels with ease. But it was not just their technology that was different. It was how they fought. A human cruiser, badly damaged, accelerated directly into a formation of devouring ships. Instead of retreating, it flew faster, weapons blazing. At the last moment, before impact, escape pods launched from its sides. The cruiser crashed into 4 enemy vessels and detonated, creating a chain reaction that destroyed 12 more human boarding pods attached to devouring command ships. Soldiers in heavy armor cut their way inside and fought through corridors filled with nightmares. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They screamed and laughed and died, taking as many enemies with them as they could. A human pilot, a fighter destroyed, used her ejection seat to crash through the bridge window of a devouring destroyer. She killed 4 creatures with her sidearm before being overwhelmed. The Accord officers watched in horror and amazement. This was not war as they understood it. This was something primal, something terrifying, something that should have been impossible. Alara had found her way to an observation dome on the surface of Thesser. She pressed her hands against the glass and watched the battle rage across the sky. Explosions bloomed like flowers of fire. Ships died and were reborn as debris fields. The sound could not reach her in the vacuum, but she could imagine it. The screams, the roars, the terrible music of destruction and through it all. The humans never stopped advancing. Admiral Una stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, watching tactical displays that moved too fast for anyone else to follow. She issued orders in a calm voice, adjusting formations, redirecting fire, coordinating the dance of 700 ships against several thousand. Alpha Wing, close on their left flank. Beta Wing, provide cover fire. Gamma Wing, I need those carriers destroyed before they can launch more fighters. Her first officer, a man named Taiwan, stood beside her with blood running from a cut on his forehead. Their ship had been hit 17 times. 30 crew members were dead. The forward weapons array was offline. Admiral, the enemy is concentrating fire on our position. Good. That means they are not firing at the Accord ships. We cannot survive another direct assault. Una turned to look at him, and something in her eyes made him step back. Then we will make sure our deaths mean something. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. But before she could give the order, the tactical display changed. The devouring fleet was breaking formation. Not to attack, to retreat. Their ships were turning, accelerating away from Thesser, fleeing into deep space. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. They are running, Taiwan whispered. The devouring are running. Una watched the enemy fleet disappear into the darkness. Her expression did not change. They are not running. They are regrouping. They have never faced humans before. They did not expect us. Now they will adapt, just as they have always adapted. She turned to face her crew. This battle is won, but the war has just begun. We hurt them today, but we did not destroy them. As long as any devouring survive, they will keep coming. They will learn our tactics. They will study our weaknesses, and they will return stronger than before. The crew listened in silence. We have one chance. We must find their homeworld. We must end this war where it started. And we must do it before they have time to rebuild. On the surface of Thesser, the refugees emerged from their shelters to find the sky clear of fire. They looked up at the human ships holding position above them, protectors where there had been only death before. Alara fell to her knees, tears streaming down her silver face. She had spent years trying to convince the galaxy that humans were real. Now she watched them save everyone who had laughed at her. A human shuttle descended and landed near the main refugee camp. Soldiers emerged, carrying medical supplies and food. They moved among the refugees without hesitation, treating wounds and offering comfort. One soldier, a young woman with kind eyes, stopped beside Ilara. "Are you hurt?" Ilara shook her head, unable to speak. The soldier smiled. "Then help us. There are a lot of wounded. We need everyone who can work." Ilara looked at this human, this creature from a species that should not exist, a species that had every reason to hate the galaxy and everyone in it. Why? She finally managed to ask, "Why are you helping us? After everything we did to you?" The soldier's smile faded, replaced by something older, something sadder. Because someone has to. Because if we stop caring about others, we stop being human. She offered her hand. "Come on. There is work to do." Ilara took the hand and let the human pull her to her feet. Above them, the stars burned with the light of victory. But everyone knew the truth. The real battle was still to come. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Thesser. 6 months of preparation, planning, and gathering strength. The combined human Accord fleet now numbered over 2,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They gathered at the edge of devouring space, where the stars grew cold and the darkness between them seemed deeper than anywhere else. "Admiral," Yuna stood at the center of the command room aboard the Remembrance, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship in her fleet. Around her stood commanders from 12 species, united for the first time since the galaxy's earliest days. They watched her with a mixture of fear, respect, and something that might have been hope. "The devouring homeworld lies 7 hours ahead," Yuna said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Our scouts have confirmed its position. This is where they were born. This is where they rebuilt. And this is where they will die." Admiral Vorath stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the display. In the months since he had first knelt before Yuna, he had learned to fight like a human, to think like a human. It had cost him much of what he thought he knew, but he had gained something more valuable. "My people are ready," he said. "We have trained with your soldiers. We have learned your tactics. Today, we fight as one." Similar statements came from other commanders. The Valani offered their precision. The Silith offered their numbers. Every species contributed what they could, following human leadership without question. Yuna looked at them all and felt something she had not expected. Pride. Not in herself, but in what they had built together. An alliance that should have been impossible, forged in the fires of desperation. "This will not be like Desser," she warned them. "The devouring have had time to prepare. They will fight harder than anything we have faced. Many of us will not survive." She paused, letting the words settle. "But we will win. Not because we are stronger, not because we are smarter, but because we are fighting for something that matters. We are fighting for everyone who died before us, for everyone who will come after us. We are fighting to end this nightmare forever." The fleet moved forward. Grandfather Deho stood on the observation deck of the Remembrance, watching the stars flow past. He had no business being here. He was 341 years old, held together by medicine and willpower. The doctors had told him his heart would give out within a year, but he had refused to stay on Earth. "I was there when it started," he had told Yuna. "I will be there when it ends." She had tried to argue, but something in his eyes had stopped her. The same look she had seen in her own mirror. The look of someone who needed to see things through, no matter the cost. A young human officer approached him. "Grandfather Deho? We are approaching the target. The Admiral thought you might want to watch from the bridge." Deho nodded slowly and followed the officer. His legs ached with every step. His lungs struggled for air, but his spirit burned brighter than it had in decades. The devouring homeworld was a nightmare made real. It hung in space like a diseased heart, pulsing with sickly light. The planet had been consumed long ago, transformed into a factory of horrors. Its surface crawled with machinery and flesh intertwined, producing ships and soldiers in endless numbers. Around it orbited thousands of vessels, the largest devouring fleet anyone had ever seen. "They were expecting us," Vorath said, his voice tight with tension. "Of course they were," Yuna replied. "They have been expecting us for 3,000 years. Today, we give them what they have been waiting for." The battle began. It was not a battle so much as a cataclysm. Ships clashed by the hundreds, filling space with fire and debris. The devouring fought with the desperation of a dying species, throwing everything they had at the advancing fleet. But the humans had planned for this. The assault came in waves. First, the heavy cruisers, punching holes in the enemy formation. Then the carriers, launching thousands of fighters that swarmed over the devouring like angry insects. Finally, the boarding ships, heading directly for the planet itself. Yuna led the assault personally. She stood in the lead boarding vessel, surrounded by soldiers in heavy armor. These were the best humanity had to offer. Veterans of 100 battles. Survivors who had nothing left to lose. "Remember why we are here," she said, as the planet grew larger in the view screen. "Remember everyone who died. remember every world that was consumed, and make them pay for it all. The landing was brutal. Their ship crashed through the planet's defenses and slammed into the surface, throwing everyone against the walls. But they had trained for this. Within seconds, they were out of the ship and fighting. The surface of the devouring homeworld was a labyrinth of metal and meat. Corridors twisted in impossible directions. Walls pulsed with organic matter. The air itself seemed hostile, thick and poisonous. Devouring creatures attacked from every shadow, endless numbers of them, each one a unique horror. The humans advanced anyway. They fought with weapons and fists. They screamed and bled and died. But for every human that fell, 10 devouring fell with them. Yuna led from the front, cutting through enemies with a ferocity that shocked even her own soldiers. She was no longer a commander. She was vengeance given form. Deep in the heart of the planet, they found the core. A massive chamber filled with pulsing machinery, the source of everything the devouring had ever created. If they destroyed this, the devouring would end forever. But standing between them and the core were more enemies than Yuna could count. Admiral, her second officer, said, "We do not have enough soldiers to break through." Yuna looked at the chamber, at the enemies, at the core that needed to die. She thought of everyone who had sacrificed everything to get them here. Her grandmother, her soldiers, the billions who had died across the galaxy. Then we will do it ourselves. She charged forward. Above the planet, the space battle raged on. The combined fleet had destroyed half the devouring ships, but their own losses were severe. The Remembrance had been hit dozens of times. Fires burned across multiple decks. Systems failed one after another. On the bridge, Deho watched it all with peaceful eyes. He knew he was dying. He had known it since they entered the system. His heart was failing, each beat weaker than the last. But he refused to look away. "Grandfather," a voice said beside him. It was Taiwan, the first officer, wounded but still standing. "The Admiral's team has reached the core. They are planting the charges." "How long?" 5 minutes until detonation. "But the devouring are counterattacking. They may not make it out." Deho nodded slowly. He understood. Some fights required sacrifice. Some victories demanded everything. Then we make sure their sacrifice means something. Tell all ships to concentrate fire on the enemy command vessels. Give our people on the ground every chance we can. On the planet's surface, Yuna fought like a demon possessed. Her armor was shattered. Her weapons were empty. She had been stabbed and burned and broken. But she refused to fall. Around her, the last of her soldiers gave their lives to protect her as she reached the core. Her hands trembled as she armed the final charge. Blood ran down her face, blinding her in one eye. Every breath was agony. But she did not stop. "For everyone who came before," she whispered. "For everyone who comes after." She activated the timer. "All units evacuate. Now." The retreat was chaos. Human and Accord soldiers fought their way back to their ships, carrying wounded comrades, leaving dead friends behind. The devouring threw everything at them, desperate to stop the inevitable. But it was too late. The core detonated. The explosion was visible from orbit. It tore through the planet's surface, cracking continents, igniting the atmosphere. A wave of destruction spread outward, consuming everything in its path. The devouring fleet, connected to their homeworld in ways no one fully understood, went dark all at once. Ships stopped moving. Creatures stopped fighting. In a single moment, 3,000 years of nightmare came to an end. On the Remembrance, the surviving crew watched in silence as the devouring homeworld broke apart. Deho smiled. Tears ran down his ancient face. "It is over," he said softly. "It is finally over." His heart stopped. They found him slumped in his chair, still facing the view screen, still smiling. The old soldier had finally found peace. Una survived, barely. They pulled her from the wreckage of her shuttle, more dead than alive. It took 6 months of medical treatment to repair her body. But wounds of the spirit heal slower than wounds of the flesh. 1 year after the final battle, the new Galactic Council met for the first time. The chamber was different now. Humans, sat among the other species, not as myths or memories, but as equals, partners, friends. Elara, now the official historian of the Accord, stood before the assembly. She had spent the past year compiling records, gathering testimonies, and writing a complete history of humanity, a history that would never be forgotten again. For 3,000 years, we called them myths, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We told ourselves they never existed because it was easier than admitting the truth, easier than remembering how much we owed them. She looked at the human delegates, at Una sitting among them with scars that would never fully fade. We called them unstable, emotional, dangerous. We were right about all of those things, but we failed to understand what those qualities truly meant. Humans do not fight despite their emotions. They fight because of them. Love, grief, rage, hope. These are not weaknesses. They are the most powerful forces in the universe. The chamber was silent as she continued. They came back for us when they had every reason to let us die. They sacrificed their sons and daughters for a galaxy that had erased their very existence. And when we asked them why, they gave us a simple answer: because someone had to. Elara looked at the assembly one final time. Today, we make a new promise. We will never forget again. We will teach our children about the humans who saved us. We will honor their dead. And we will stand beside them, not because we owe them, but because they showed us what it truly means to be alive. Admiral Una rose from her seat and walked to the center of the chamber. The scars on her face told a story that needed no words. She looked at the representatives of 12 species, at the future they had built together with blood and sacrifice. We did not come back for gratitude, she said. We came back because this is who we are. We cannot watch suffering and do nothing. We cannot turn away from those in need. It is our greatest weakness and our greatest strength. She paused, and something like a smile crossed her battered face. We are human. We remember. We care. And we will never hide again. The chamber erupted in applause. Humans, Villani, Tauric, Silith. 12 species, united by war, bound by hope, learning to build something new together. Outside, the stars burned bright in the endless darkness. The myth had become truth, and humanity had finally come home.